So today I'm going to be interviewing Joel Haver. You guys probably already know him, but yeah, he's pretty much the biggest folk filmmaker on YouTube. And I did an interview with him 2 years ago, and let's just start with that time in between those interviews. What's your favorite filmmaking moment that has happened in the last 2 years?
One of my favorite things is when my channel, because when we first talked, I was a very small channel. I had 1,000 to 2,000 subscribers, I think. And you reached out because you saw a video of mine on Reddit talking about making my weekly shorts. And since then, that November of 2019, when we first talked, my channel kind of took off and all my work kind of got recognized. And if I were to pinpoint one thing that was most exciting about that for me, beyond just being like, okay, I could finally support myself off my work, beyond that, it was when like Pretend That You Love Me went from like 1,000 views to now it has 500,000 views. And what was so exciting about that to me, beyond the simple fact of, oh boy, people are watching my movie, is it was indicative of the fact that people online have patience for like something strange, something that's not like what they're used to, something more personal, emotional, real, slow paced. You know, it's a very atypical movie, and the fact that it's my biggest movie, I think, just speaks to the fact that audiences like want things that feel real, and no one's giving it to them because corporations and movie companies just think people are dumb. You know, so I think that was very exciting, and it just signaled to a more exciting future for folk filmmaking, independent filmmaking in general. And that was another exciting element.
Yeah, Pretend That You Love Me, like when that was after I interviewed you, and when I watched that movie, I was just absolutely blown away. So I'm glad that it's kind of gotten that like 500,000 views and whatever, and it's been pretty like exposed online. And I absolutely love that movie. I want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, like, because the movie is so personal, was it kind of difficult to release it?
I've always found, like, I kind of, at some point, I lost the nerves of, like, sharing really personal stuff. Like, at some point, I lost the anxiety that would come with that, and instead, it kind of became therapeutic. Because for me, like, when I love a movie, and a movie really connects with me, it's when I feel like the director has, like, kind of exposed their heart to me, and then I could see a little bit of myself inside them. Yeah. I think it was therapeutic because not only am I like putting myself out there and be like, hey, can any of you guys relate to this? You know, that kind of like, hey, am I alone on this kind of, but also like hearing people respond back and be like, no, I feel you, man. Like, I understand exactly what this is saying. Even though it was so abstract and in what it wanted to say or what it was trying to say, I think people were still able to latch onto it and, you know, connect to it on a human level. And I'd say releasing it was exciting for that reason, that, you know, I was looking forward to this almost emotional validation that like what I feel is not only what I feel, you know?
Yeah. And I think like everyone who kind of watches that film and really falls in love with it is because of how personal and like upfront about like kind of the artist's personal life it is. And like it was just really inspiring to me, at least when I made my first feature film, The Lost Day of Childhood. I have like scenes of me crying, and definitely, you know, watching Pretend That You Love Me and seeing that and seeing just like you showing that was very inspiring to me. So
yeah, well, I'm glad, and we haven't mentioned that yet. Since we talked, you have directed a feature, and you've continued to make great stuff on YouTube, great shorts, and yeah, when I saw your film, it excited me for that reason as well. I'm like, you were 17, 18 while you shot that, and you were like capturing some very raw moments. And I was like, you know, it signaled to me that like, you know, not to talk down to you because you're younger, but like your generation is going to be probably way more artistically open and interesting from an early age, just because you lived your whole life with like, you know, performing almost, or your whole life having your life on display. And the people who harness that in a positive way, like you did with Last Day of Childhood, rather than like, you know, just grinding for views and like being fake, the people who harness that in an honest way are going to create some of the like most impactful art. I feel like your generation, and it's pretty well my generation. I think we have a 6-year age gap or something, but there's going to be some really exciting stuff to come from that.
Yeah, especially now that, you know, there's no the restrictions of being able to make a film are like so loose. And, you know, I go to film school and people see that Joel Haver is commenting on my YouTube videos that has like 50 views, and people are like, "What, Joel Haver is commenting on your video?" I'm like, yeah. So like, I think like people are like really exposed to you, at least like in film school, and like the film students I talk to and everything know who Joel Haver is, and I think that's really exciting because you're making feature films and you're kind of sharing this idea that anyone can make a film. And, you know, on the folk filmmaking kind of whole community, there's so many films that are like inspired by Joel Haver, and like kind of some of them like outright say that. So what do you feel when you see something like that, where, you know, it's clear that you have inspired this person to make a film?
I think the best example is when I watched is it Zaid or Zaid? Do you know how to pronounce it?
Zaid.
Oh, Zaid. Yeah, Zaid Aftab's movie, The Printer and the Boy, which was a movie he made pretty well himself. I think he had his family help for a bit of it, but in quarantine. And it's one of my favorite folk films of probably 2020. I think it was very well done. And it opens with a dedication that says, "For Joel Haver, who showed me I can make movies," or something like that. And if that was running in my head when you asked me like my favorite filmmaking moments, like seeing, like, there's been a lot of films that people have like reached out to me and told me that like Island or this or that showed them they could make it, but like him putting that dedication was just like a punch in the gut. Like, oh my God, I'm reaching people. And like, because I went to film school too, and I think we could have a good talk about film school in general, but there is a lot of discouragement and a lot of apathy in film school. And the one thing leaving I wanted to do more than anything is to just like try to be contagious with my passion. You know, try to like rub off on people and like be like, hey, you don't have to do it this way. You don't have to wait your turn. And seeing like The Printer and the Boy was just such a beautiful moment, because not only did it have the dedication, but it was also a great film. You know, it was really beautiful, and it had a lot of great scenes, long takes, and that was the shining moment for me as far as watching independent films last year.
Yeah. And why do you think so many people are hesitant about the idea of, you know, you can make a full movie? Because if I bring that up in a like film school, for example, a lot of people, even though they see you making full films, they're like, still they kind of have a doubt of like, can I do it? Like, can I really do it? I don't think that's really still possible, you know?
I don't want to talk too verbosely about it or too like grandly, but I think it's like whenever your mind is introduced to an idea that totally confronts your entire understanding of a concept, you have to have a grace period of rejecting it. You have to be like, no way. Like, you know, my brother's a kind of hippie guy, and he's introduced me to some pretty crazy concepts, and I'm always defensive at first. You know, I'm always like, no, this is the way things are. No, this is. So I think it translates the same to filmmaking. People, you know, you grow up watching expensive movies. All the movies you watch as a kid in theaters, they're expensive. Even the independent films are millions of dollars, you know, and it's such a earth-shattering idea, especially if you haven't been exposed to it before, that you kind of need to react, you know, in order, you need to like fight for your values initially, because you're like, I know what a movie is, like, and once you break through, I've had a lot of my friends who were hesitant at first come back to me and be like, I know what you're talking, like, I like, they watch some folk films, they watch some videos where me or Dan Lotz or someone talks about making films, and they come back to me and they're like, I totally get what you're saying now. Like, this is so much more liberating, freeing. It's like filmmaking for filmmaking's sake. It's detached from the commercial aspect as much as you possibly can, and while still sharing it and still having people see it. I guess you can make movies alone and never show them to anyone, and that'd be as far detached as you could get. But what's the point in that? But I think, yeah, that sums it up. I sympathize with the people, and I if you came to me saying that when I was younger, I probably, like, before I had gone on this journey of like personal filmmaking discovery, I probably would have been a little adverse to the idea as well.
Yeah. So, and what caused you to kind of have this realization when you were younger?
I think it was just an ongoing process. I don't think there was a single moment. I think it was going to film school and, you know, just little moments of discouragement and looking around me. And it's like getting a film degree is impractical. You know, it doesn't really make sense. You're never going to be like using your film degree unless you're getting like really crummy jobs, you know, are contrary to your dreams anyways. But, so it's just like you're chasing your dreams going for a film degree. It's like, I'm going to like pay a buttload of money for 4 years to just like practice this and hone this craft that I want to chase. And then you look around you and 70, 80, 90% of the students are just like half-assing the whole experience. And, you know, they make the bare minimum amount of films. They make the bare minimum effort in each of those films. And it's just like, it was so discouraging to me because even throughout film school, I was doing stuff on a weekly basis. And I would always look around and be like, don't you guys love this? Like, why do you come here? Like, it's such a specific choice to go to film school. It's like you made this choice like haphazardly, and
it's so expensive. Like, and it's like years of your life, and it's so expensive. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's shocking when you like actually think about how kind of. Yeah.
And I understand, like, once again, it's worth empathizing with those people because apathy, depression, you know, doubt, self-doubt, these things are really powerful and they're really hard to overcome. And even I still face apathetic days or apathetic stretches of time where I'm just like, come on, Joel, get off your butt and make something, you know. But I think that was what did it for me. I was just always making stuff, and I wanted the people around me to be making stuff. Like, I wanted to go to class each week and have everyone show like amazing, interesting films and like have like interesting discussions, but it just wasn't that, you know. Film school was like, you know, I'm not gonna say I was making the best stuff. I don't think my stuff came into full like voice until senior year, but like I was still like really putting passion and time into it, and I'd come in and like, you know, some people made interesting good stuff, but then no one wants to talk about it either. You know, you sit down and somebody shows something they spent like a week or a couple weeks on, and then everyone's just like, oh yeah, it was good. It's like, can't we like dissect the form or have some interesting conversation? And what I come back to is we never even talked about YouTube in all 4 years of film school. And I'm like, aren't the young generations in college supposed to be like dissecting and attacking the form and finding out how it has changed and where it's going? And we didn't do any of that. Like, if we did, we would have been like, yes, self-distribution online. Yes, $0. You have an iPhone, shoot on an iPhone. We didn't talk about any of that. And instead we just like, you know, talked about f-stop and ISO and, you know, like setting up a tripod. We literally had times in class where we had a tutorial on how to set up a tripod. I'm like, I'm paying for this. Like, you just open it. Like, it's self-explanatory. Yeah. And it's
hard.
I could talk on and on.
The whole year, for me, like this 2021, that's pretty much the whole year experience that I've had. But yeah, like, it's crazy, especially because they're so easy to dismiss YouTube, but the way they're teaching things is like, normally they chuck on a video by a YouTuber that explains things for them. And that's like the biggest like part where it like kind of makes me a bit frustrated. But yeah, why am I paying for something I can just learn online And yeah.
Yeah, I always loved when teachers would pull up YouTube videos in high school and stuff or like documentaries that are on YouTube, and you're like, I could do this at home. Like, why am I coming to school? And like seeing that continue into college was so disheartening. It's just like, it's like, and like you're saying, there's an irony to it that YouTube is so utilized by schools and stuff, but they also don't treat it as a valid career or a valid form of artistic expression,
Yeah. For your final year in film school, you made like a whole feature film. So how did the film school react to that?
That's the thing. I think I've talked to some friends about it, and I loved a lot of the faculty. I had some great professors, but there was just a general air of like, I don't want to say jealousy, but a lot of the faculty were like filmmakers as well, and they had made like a feature like 10 years ago or like 15 years ago, and there was just this feeling that like if you did something ambitious, they weren't that excited for you. Like I felt like the faculty should have been like cheering on their students, and like they should have been like, hell yeah, you did something crazy. And some people like I had my thesis professor was great, but yeah, just even like the other students, like there wasn't like this recognition, and I'm not asking for myself personally, but there wasn't like an excitement or recognition when others did like great work, and it just felt like, okay, nice job. Oh, that was really cool. Great, beautiful shots. And it whittles down like to a compliment, and they move on. And I just showed 10 minutes because we only had a short time slot at the thesis show, so I just showed like 10 minutes of the full thing. But yeah, it was fun. I'm glad I did it. I'm happy. I'm going to be famous, and as a smaller part of that, I did another feature called Taking a Little Time to Feel Sorry for Myself, which was like an offshoot where I had to act in a feature, so I just made my own. So I did 2 features my senior year, which was exciting. But yeah, it's film school. It's I wouldn't go back and undo it because it made me who I am. But nowadays, there's so many people, myself, Dan, you, Cody Clark. There's so many people talking about this that you could like get that same inspiration and growth elsewhere. That even like if I could point to film school for one thing, it's how it made me chase my passion and kind of reject the form. But now that you can do that elsewhere, it's hard to see what film school is going to serve its purpose for it in the long run, especially year by year. And I know this is disheartening to say to you because you're in film school, but it's just like, you really make the most of it if you're already in film school. Not just to anyone listening, just like you have access to equipment, you have access to like, other filmmakers, other people who know how to use equipment, like use your time. Like you should be like every weekend, every free time you have, you should be shooting and making stuff. Because like at the very least, paying all that money, like learn how to like get good with whatever camera you have, learn how to get good with like, working with actors, working with friends, because the best thing you could do in film school is come out the other end kind of self-sufficient and almost invincible,
Yeah. Something I've been really curious about is kind of your improvised style, and how you kind of work with actors within that style. Like for Pretend That You Love Me especially, where you have like different actors, and it's very like kind of abstract at the beginning, and how do you explain like what's actually going on to the actors, when maybe you don't even know what's going on.
Pretend That You Love Me, I try to dance around some questions because there's a kind of mysterious ethos to the film that I don't want to lose. But I will say that I love all of them so much for trusting me, because it was an insane project, and it never really had a direction, and it was kind of like, let's figure this out as we go. So the four main actresses who were part of that, they're amazing. I've done some shorts with some of them, and they're just all great actresses. But I'll say in general, the improv thing is way simpler than you would ever think, because all it is like skip the scripting process, go right to shooting, and then just let people be themselves, you know? Like, sometimes it's not any more complicated than saying, like, let's just sit and have a 20-minute conversation, and I'll cut like a good 2-minute chunk out of that, or like let's actually just talk as ourselves. And you know, it's funny because some of my work, like, forget about everything for a while, and they get compliments for like writing such natural dialogue, and I'm just like, you know, I'd love to take credit for that and say, yes, I know the human condition so perfectly. I wrote it, and I'm like, no, I just literally said, let's just talk. I'm like, no plan. I'm just like, let's just have a conversation and see where it goes, because I think conversations are inherently compelling. I think there's like conflict that is like in everything we say, you know, that every conversation is a series of questions and answers, and if things don't get answered, that's a whole different conflict. And if you just let conversations happen, they'll be compelling, especially if you have a decisive eye about like when to enter them and leave them, you know.
Yeah. Has there been any moments where you started an improvised kind of project but it didn't work out, or it kind of didn't come together as you hoped it would?
No, I don't think so. I pretty well like most recently I did that little documentary about my road trip called I don't know where I'm going, but I'm glad that I'm here. And that was, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I might have pointed to that, because that was footage I shot and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. But eventually I'm just like, okay, it's been enough time. Let's just like turn this into something. So you know, I think if you edit smartly and you kind of capture knowing somewhat how you're going to edit, you could always turn it into something, you know. And that's the beauty of improv, that the editing is such a powerful part of the storytelling and the story writing. You know, you're writing it, and you definitely experienced that doing Last Day of Childhood. You know, is a very free form film. And I think that's what's so exciting about improv to me, is that there's only, I can't even picture how one would go so wrong that I don't use it anymore, because it's just, there's no rules and no regulations on like what you're supposed to do or what you're trying to capture, that like you find it somehow, you know, no matter what happens. Yeah,
to me, like, making Last Day of Childhood and the way it was so improvised was like a huge leap of faith that I'm just gonna trust in whatever happens. I filmed the first half of that film, and I was like, okay, what the hell am I gonna do with this now, you know? And then it just somehow, if you give it enough time, it works out and grows into something. But yeah, I think time is like the key, where sometimes things aren't working in the moment, but you know, if you give yourself a few days, if you even forget about it for a bit and you just kind of let it run in the background, your mind will do some processing and it'll come up with some new interesting ideas.
Yeah, because I always say this, because like Dan Lotz has done some improv films, and I think he kind of fell in love with the idea because he hasn't gone back since. But I can't. I always say that to most filmmakers. I'm like, if you just gave yourself the chance to make an improv feature, I'm not saying you'll never write a movie again, but you'll definitely make more improv features. You know, you'll definitely make more improv shorts or whatever you want to do. But you know, it's not even like, I feel like when you talk about improv, people think about something like Pretend That You Love Me or Last Day of Childhood, which is very loose, and it comes across feeling loose. But, you know, I just did my movie Drowning in Potential, which is also improv feature. And, you know, all my features are improv minus taking a little time to feel sorry, which I think we talked about last time. I feel like it's kind of stilted, kind of awkward, not as strong as the rest of my work. I think it's shot really well and it has great scenes, but I don't think the story side of it is as strong. But like talking about that, like, you could do more narrative stuff with improv. And if I were to point to one thing that I think is most exciting about my improv, it's just that, like, Drowning in Potential. You know, it's a fairly like mumblecore movie. You know, I don't consider it mumblecore. I think it has too much action and excitement in ways for it to be like full blown, just like talking. But you know, it's a full blown like narrative film that was just totally made up on the fly. And you know, we'd shoot scenes and like it was like a puzzle. You know, each day we'd like figure out like, okay, who can we film with today? Is it just us today? You know, and if we film with people, we just shoot their scenes, plot them on this timeline, and we're tracking, like mentally tracking his character arc. And we're like, okay, we did this today and this today. What goes between there? And it was like day by day building a timeline puzzle that we were just making up as we went. And, you know, figure like each day we didn't know, like some were very spontaneous. Like one scene with our friend Alex Ernst, he has a great scene, but he literally, we're like, hey Alex, you want to be in a movie? He's like, let's do it tonight. And we had no idea. So we literally an hour after we sent the text, we were filming, and we just made up a scene. And I really love his scene. It turned out great. I'm not sure if you've seen the movie yet, but did you? Yeah, he's the crazy guy, the app developer guy who's yelling at me on the street. So yeah, that was totally just made up on the fly. And, you know, some of it feels very loose and improv in that sense, but I think it still comes across as a fuller narrative film, which is why I think people reject improv at first. They think, oh, it's just going to feel like people talking. It's just going to feel like experimental and weird. But you could still, if you're smart and you're like tracking the story as you go and like piecing it together as I was explaining, it'll come out feeling more scripted than improv, and in a good way. And the improv will still shine through because it will be very honest and very like human in the way improv only can be, I feel like.
Yeah. How did you discover improv, and how did you kind of fall into it?
I think it goes back to just filming as a kid, you know, like I was filming little skits and stupid videos since I was like 8. And we never sat down and we're like, okay, what's the themes of this work? What's the, we never wrote a script. It was all just improv and nonsense and, just us yelling. And, I have nostalgia for those videos, but if you watch them now, they probably are pretty horrible, but to an objective audience. But I think it was that. I went to film school and I did quite a bit more scripted stuff. So my sophomore thesis and my junior thesis were scripted, and a lot of my little projects along the way were scripted. And I wouldn't say I didn't have a good time. I really like a lot of those projects, but I think they felt too guaranteed to me. I always loved the ebb and flow and the joy of like feeling like this film could fall apart any second. And is this gonna work? And like, like I said, pretty well everything works once you do it enough and you get used to it. But it's still this excitement that's like, what is this gonna be? And then you're cracking up because it goes a totally different direction, or you're like, oh, this is really an interesting direction and a drama. But doing those scripted things just felt too certain, like I knew every moment from the moment I wrote it. I knew I wasn't so methodical that I was doing storyboards and shot list, but I still roughly knew how I would shoot each scene. And, it just felt like executing rather than like just improvising. And that's when I think I pushed away from that, especially with I'm Going to Be Famous. And then like, I'm glad I did a scripted feature, but like even that pushed me away because I'm just like, it feels scripted. And obviously I could make a scripted feature that doesn't feel quite so scripted, but just at the time that was my skill set. But I just think, I think it's just the love for the spontaneity, the love for the, just like saying fuck it and just doing whatever makes you, laugh that day, whatever makes you cry that day, whatever makes you want to express yourself. And, because you can never premeditate that. A script is all about premeditating, like pre-production is all about like, caution and making sure everything works and like thinking through everything. And at the end of the day, you can never premeditate like the day of the shoot, how you're going to feel. And like, improv allows you to communicate that. Improv allows you to be like, okay, this is how I was feeling this day, or this, this is what we were doing this day. This is,
Yeah. So what have been the influences on the Joel Haver style?
I always say John Cassavetes. Have you seen any of his films since we spoke?
I've started watching it, and I was actually thinking about that quite a lot while watching John Cassavetes. I was like, oh, I get to see a bit of Joel
Yeah.
in this.
His is definitely a little less funny than me. He can be pretty funny, but his is very serious and usually pretty depressing. But yeah, his style is just like, he was somebody I watched like sophomore, junior year of college, and I was like, oh man, this guy's like doing what I was doing. And I think he wrote more scripts, but he was still very loose in improv. And, you know, I was just watching interviews with him the other day, and he said something that just is exactly how I feel. And he's like, anyone coming on my film is going to have a chance to express themselves. And I think that's such a powerful thing, because most films aren't that. Most films are executing. Most films are, you do this, this is your role, this is how I want you to say this is how I want you to do this. But you just know watching his films that everyone was kind of given the reins to their character, and they could just do whatever the hell they want. And, you know, even the camera operator is very shaky, very like reactionary. And if there's a life to it, that scripting can drain. And of course there's a lot of scripted films that are beautiful and full of life, but I think John Cassavetes really showed me, like, he showed me I was on to something, because I'm like, okay, this is a valid way to make stuff. It's valid to just grab a camera, you know, trust yourself, trust your friends, and just go for it. And his films are my favorite ever. And then the other influence is just YouTube. I think growing up watching YouTube, you know, 2006, I was like 10 years old when YouTube really started taking off. And seeing like Smosh, and, you know, I don't think much of the early YouTube stuff holds up. I don't think it's that funny anymore. Like, if you go back to Smosh, it's like, this is, you know, but it's still like so influential, because it's doing what I'm hoping I can do for other people. And it showed me that I can make stuff, you know. It showed me that I could just post stuff online, and I did. And I think my brother and I's first YouTube video was like 2007 or something. It's on some old channel, but YouTube, John Cassavetes, and then some other, like Kiarostami. I love his meta, self-reflexive nature, and that definitely seeps into my work a lot. But yeah, I'd say those three are definitely hitting on most of what I pull from. Yeah,
what I find like so exciting about John Cassavetes is kind of the imperfection in his work. It's like so, like, the imperfection of it is like really exciting to me, because it's like anything can happen right now. The camera can like move any direction, and it's like free, you know. And it's I feel the same thing from your work. So I definitely, and even from YouTube, and a bit of Kiarostami is like free as well. It feels very loose, and it feels like the film is kind of discovering itself as it goes along, almost. So yeah, I would definitely find that very exciting.
There's a funny anecdote from John Cassavetes that I think every filmmaker should like listen to, and it's that I forget, it's some behind the scenes he's talking about this, but he's talking about how Shadows, his first feature, which he did in like the 50s, which he just casted people off the street and just made it himself, like pretty well one of, if not the first independent films ever made, you know. And but like Shadows, the audio was like really bad. Like, they filmed it next to like a ballet studio, so you could hear like stamping and stuff. And like he said, like, they spent a year and a half trying to fix the audio, and they just couldn't. So they eventually gave up and just showed the film as is. And when they showed it, audiences like applauded how raw the audio is. They're like, this audio is incredible. It's so bold. And like, he's like, we spent a year trying to fix it, and everyone loved how like imperfect it was. And like there's like a thing with imperfection that, like, if you're not being shown like constantly perfect, polished images, it feels more relatable. You know, it feels more human. You're like, I could see myself making that, because my stuff isn't perfect, you know. But you go to see a Marvel movie or something, and everything is so polished, and it's just like, or even like most A24 movies or smaller movies like that. It's just like, it's so polished to a T that it sends the message that like, your work should be perfect or else, better luck next time, And then you see John Cassavetes being remembered through cinematic history, and you're like, okay, never mind. I could do whatever I want, Mikey and Nikki, which is stars John Cassavetes, but it's directed by Elaine May. It's full of like shots are out of focus, like the audio isn't synced up right, and it never detracts from the movie. You're just watching it and you're like, yeah, this is awesome. It feels gritty, and the movie is a kind of gritty, raw nightlife movie. And Imperfection is so underrated as a form of expression, and I think you see it a lot in painting. You see it a lot even in a little music, but it hasn't really found its way to film in the mainstream. And I think it's really exciting to watch something like that.
Yeah, and like it's so exciting to think about, what could have Cassavetes done if he had access to YouTube, Like he really struggled with kind of getting his films out there. And if he just had YouTube, he would be like, the possibilities would have been so much more open, and I feel like that's what we're going to see in the next few decades, and that's like so exciting to me.
Yeah, I always ask myself, if John Cassavetes was alive today, would he do what I was doing? And not to treat him like a perfect man. I think he was an alcoholic, and I'm sure he could have been a bit of an asshole sometimes. But he was like kind of like, if you look at what he was doing back then, he's doing what people like us and Dan Lotz, and I keep listing the same people. There's more people. Doom Productions. I just watched Waterfront by
Twist Visuals.
Yeah, Twist Visuals, and there's just all these people making movies now, and I see what John Cassavetes did back then, and he rejected the systems in place, made stuff himself, didn't really care about distribution. A lot of his films he kind of owned, and I think he did some for studios, but I think he hated the experience most of the time. But you look at that and you're like, what's the equivalent of that nowadays? And it's not going to festivals, and it's not getting picked up by A24. The equivalent to that nowadays is rejecting all the systems once again and looking to the new possibilities of cheaper equipment, cheaper than ever, the free distribution. And it's like John Cassavetes, people, I think some cinema snobs wouldn't admit it, but John Cassavetes would be uploading to YouTube. I think his content would look a lot different because of that, because of the differences in technology, but he would be putting his stuff on YouTube. Faces would be a YouTube video, and I think whenever I think of that, I'm like, we're on the right path, and there's going to be some really exciting stuff coming out of the internet in the next 10, 20 years. Like the best movies, we're going to get to the point where all the most worthwhile movies worth talking about are online by like independent filmmakers. And yeah, for sure. Another thing I've been curious about is just with your growing kind of audience, has there been more pressure while making your shorts and features? Have you felt a bit more pressure of, this idea has to be good because there's a certain amount of people that are going to be watching it, that you feel it all? There's definitely pressure, and it was worse when I was first adjusting to get first when my channel took off. But I'd say there's a lot of pressure, but I did a good job not altering my work because of it. Of course my animations are way more watched than all my live action stuff for the most part. But I still don't feel this pressure to only do animations, because if I only did that, people would get disinterested. I would get disinterested. I would work myself to death. I would, I at the end of the day, if I'm getting like 1/10 the views, but I'm doing what I actually like, I'm at the point where I could be healthy about that and be like, that's better. It's better to sacrifice views if it means you're doing what you want to make and your passion is still there and you're keeping your passion alive. So it's definitely, there's always this feeling like, damn, I wish more people were checking out like this or that. Like it'd be nice to have like a personal documentary get the same million views that a goofy animation does. But at the end of the day, it's amazing that 100,000+ people checked out a personal documentary like the one I did last week. Yeah. It's like, incredible to live in a day and age where you could just make something and get it seen to that scale. And, you know, it's not going to happen for everyone, and it takes a lot of time to get there. But even 1/100th of that, like 1,000 people watching your thing, like submit to a festival, there might only be 50 people in the audience. So like on YouTube, you could get 20 times that, you know, like how powerful is that? And, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Has the pressure and like dealing with that, was that the most surprising part of growing an audience?
I'd say so. I think the most surprising part is just like the financials of it, because, you know, I'm supporting myself. I'm not running it like a business. I haven't taken any sponsors. And like I could have made 5 times the amount of money if I just did like a Manscaped ad on all my animations, you know, but I didn't want to do that. I'm still trying my best. You know, there is a dichotomy where you're trying to juggle like, okay, this is my job, but I still want to have it be passion driven, and I still want it to be filmmaking for filmmaking's sake. So, you know, I'm glad I took so long to blow up, because I proved that I would be doing this regardless of if there was money coming in or if there was views coming in. But the financials of it certainly are a little annoying, and that's why I got the van. I'm like, I don't want to think about the money. I don't spend any money. I'm just like, I don't want to think about this, because it's just not interesting to me to like conflate my art with that, and it's like a battle you have to face if you do get recognized. But my hope is to do some good with the money down the line, but until then I'm just kind of trying to keep that passion alive and just make and forget about it. And just a lot of the logistical stuff. Like I don't have an accountant to deal with the money, which sucks. I'm so bad at procrastinating, and it's not that much money, but it's way, way, way more than I've ever made in previous years. You know, like I was making like 15,000 a year or some years or something. So, yeah, and then like I lost my health insurance. That was a whole thing. I finally got health insurance back. You know, it's just all the bureaucracy of like succeeding. You know, it's like if you make like millions of dollars, you could just hire someone to deal with that. But if you make like a mid-range amount of money, you're devoting your time to just figuring out what your money is and how to deal with it and how to have doctor's appointments. But that's probably the most. I haven't even dealt with that really, but that's probably the trickiest part. And just dancing around the money. And I've been able to support some friends and support my mom, which has been really nice. That's been a really nice part of it, like uplifting other people, and I want to find ways to do that in a more significant way, but that's all TBD, because I got to figure out what those are first.
Yeah, it's all a process. Has it been harder to keep up with your promise of watching every feature film sent to you?
I'd say so. There's not quite as many as you'd expect, but I am getting one every other week or something, and I just add it to a playlist. And you know, I randomly watched Waterfront the other week just because I watched his previous film, Fakir, I think it was called. And I don't make time as is right now to watch movies, which is one of the biggest bummers, just because I'm so busy creating and acting in other people's stuff. And, you know, editing and animating, that I just don't make time for movies right now. So I eventually, I think a fun way to do it will be like once a month, sit down and watch like 3, just set aside a night to just watch a couple and like work my way through them, and doing that with a friend or something. But, yeah, there's certainly more movies than ever being made, which is really exciting. And Dan does a great job making a playlist and keeping up with that. Like 922 Films, go to their channel and watch. You know, they have a bunch of playlists of the films coming out right now. And yeah, it's exciting. I think some people aren't even aware that there's like a movement or a lot of people doing this. You know, some people just seem to be making movies. Like I know RC Films that did Not So Amazing. I know they kind of made it on their own fruition, and only afterwards discovered like, oh my God, there's all these other filmmakers online. So I think the more we come together, but I never want it to be like an exclusive club or collective, and that's why when Dan Lotz like labels it folk filmmaking, which I think is a great term for it, but I think it comes across as feeling like almost forcing a movement or forcing this collective or like, hey, I founded this. And I don't think he is that egotistical. I don't think he's trying to do that, but it comes across that way. And that's my hesitancy, because I never want it to feel like an exclusive club. I always want it to feel like anyone can do this. Anyone can do what we're doing. And, there still needs to be a level of individuality to it where each filmmaker is separate and they're doing their own things and they just happen to know and support each other. I think that's pretty well what's happening, and I think that's really exciting. The more of us we come together, the more it's like each film is gonna like inherently have an audience built in, just because there's so many filmmakers watching it. Yeah.
Do you think like folk films have kind of broken through that barrier of reaching like people that are not filmmakers yet? And do you think it will break through that barrier eventually?
I think mine probably have to some level, just because I have an audience from my shorts, and I think people in general, I think it's that apathy. It's that like just like waiting to be shown what people show you. But people are very not explorative. They don't like go out of their way to find new content themselves. They just kind of wait for the algorithms of the various websites to like show them something. And so I think that's the biggest uphill battle, because I think there has been some spillover, to you and Dan and Cody and all of them from like my stuff, just people like being curious, like, are other people doing this? And then they find your guys' stuff. But I don't think it's enough to say that like they're truly reaching a big audience. And how does that happen? I don't know. I just think we need a lot of really great movies to be being made, I think we need like, if we have 1 year where 10 genuinely like great movies are released on YouTube, then it'll make a splash, I feel like. And I think some will go unrecognized. There's a lot of great folk films. I think, to me, like folk films, no budget films, are great inherently because of the passion it required to make one, because somebody put in the time and effort to make one. That's why I rate every folk film a 5 on Letterboxd, just because like not only is the so few views that like a rating can really drag it down, but like I rate it a 5 because it's just like 5 out of 5 for making a movie, and then quality be damned, you made a movie. And but yeah, I do think we need like for it to reach the mainstream, you need stuff that like people will look at and be like, either wow, this is really different and I love it, like people have like I think that's sort of the reaction people have with Pretend That You Love Me, or like, wow, this feels like a genuine movie, which I think like one of Dan Lotz's 12 features might have that potential, just because his are very cinematic and they're classically kind of narrative. I think people will latch onto that if he has one that just like hits on all cylinders and people really connect with.
As a filmmaker, and like when you like reviewed Lost of Childhood, something I really appreciated was that you're still like honest about it and what you like, what you didn't like, even though you give that 5-star review, okay, the second half kind of dwindled a little, and like that's really helpful. And I think sometimes it can be a bit like if you make a movie online, everybody's like, okay, great job, but they don't like tell you necessarily what they honestly didn't like. And I really appreciate that you like just kind of say honest opinions, and
Yeah, I think it's people like use the word constructive criticism kind of loosely. People are like, YouTube got rid of the dislike button. They're like, there goes constructive criticism. It's like, there's nothing constructive about a thumbs down. Like if somebody showed you their painting and you just went and walked away, like that's not constructive. And like some people are just like, this sucks, and they're like, what, you can't take constructive criticism? It's like, no, constructive criticism is being like, it needs to be backed by some level of encouragement, it can, I'm not saying like blind, like, yes, you're amazing, but I'm saying like, this didn't work, but hey, you made a movie, it's great, I can't wait for what's next. Or, just simple statements like that could really, they make the criticism easier to take. They make it easier to like actually, because all filmmakers have that sort of ego that fights inside them when like somebody's just a straight up jerk, and then you just like reject everything they say, even though maybe some of it is valid. Especially in film school, sometimes I was pretty bad at taking criticism. Like professors would give me sometimes valid criticism, but sometimes it just felt a little too late on. It felt a little heavy, and I rejected it, but it was mostly my fault. I just had a lot of maturing to do. But yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that, because I don't want it to seem like I'm just like giving blind love to everything, even though I do like giving blind love to everything.
Yeah. So let's kind of end with a big question. So why do you love movies or art in general?
All right, movies are art because it's two different things.
Like just
it's like a square rectangle.
Creativity. Why do you appreciate creativity?
It allows you to express yourself in a way that no other walk of life does, because if you're in a relationship, if you're like, there's other ways creativity and passion and stuff comes into life, but it's always very personal, or it's very direct. Creativity in love is directed at your partner. Creativity in like family is directed at your family and your friends. But like art, at least art in the public sphere, art that's being shown, is this thing where you could be like, everyone else check me out. Like my partner knows me, my family knows me, but here's me to the world. And there's something about casting that net, that really broad net that like welcomes in so many new viewpoints, and it validates you. And once again, I don't think blind validation is always good. I don't think it's that bad either. People act like you're just a yes man. Somebody commented because I liked my friend's movie, and I'm just like, no, I just like the movie. I'm not a yes man, But I do think casting that net and receiving validation back, that other people see what you're doing, other people understand what you're doing, other people connect to who you are, is very therapeutic. It's very life affirming in ways that, like, I have a lot of friends and stuff that are in relationships, or they've been in relationships where they kind of become very insular, and their entire being is based on this association with their partner, and looking elsewhere for that sort of connectivity, looking elsewhere for that sharing, both in sharing your art and looking at other people's art. It gives you a broader view on life and a broader view on yourself in a way that just like, cuddling the same person every night could only go so far.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And let's end with like a recommendation, like a movie that you recommend, something that you want people to watch.
All right. I always, I go to John Cassavetes, but if I were to do John Cassavetes, I always recommend starting with Faces. Faces, I think, is him at a very raw point in his career. It's like super raw, but it's not his rawest. Like his first film, Shadows, was definitely rougher around the edges. But Faces is like him raw yet controlled, and it eases you into like engaging with his work. So I recommend that. And second recommendation, just for fun, is Close Up by Kiarostami. Close Up is one of those movies that just, I saw it in theaters, like it was a 35 millimeter projection. Like I was hanging out with some girl at the time, and we went to see it in New York, and it was this movie that I didn't recognize it at the time, but it definitely like clicked something in my head. Like I could feel like, oh, okay, and that's it clicked that meta thing in my head, because that movie has really beautiful meta narrative and acknowledgement of the filmmaking and stuff like that. And I recently revisited it, I think twice now. I've seen it 3 times total, but and it just makes me cry now so much. And I'm just like, in a theater, I wasn't willing to cry because I was shy, and I don't like crying in movie theaters. But like when I'm home alone, I just like I can sob, and it feels good. So yeah, those are my 2 recommendations. How about you?
Oh wow, throwing it back. Okay, so Cassavetes, I literally just started watching his films. I watched A Woman on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, and that was...
I know, A Woman Under the Influence.
Oh yeah, well, oh yeah.
That one is
that's
Almodovar.
Almodovar. Okay, cool.
But I confuse those two. I confuse them too. Yeah.
People used to like recommend me those 2 movies, and like I was like, which one is which? Anyways, but which one is it again?
A Woman Under the Influence.
Yeah, A Woman Under the Influence is like one I watched it this month, and that was like my first Cassavetes, and I really loved that, so I would recommend that. And just check out folk films. Always, supporting the folk filmmaking movement and everything. And yeah.
Do you have a folk film? You'd shout out?
Folk film I would shout out. My friend Mohit made Void Man recently, which is like a 3-hour crime epic, which I highly recommend. But yeah. That
3-hour runtime, it's tough to dive into, but yeah, I saw that and super impressive. I'm excited to watch it somewhere down the line.
Yeah, it really doesn't feel like 3 hours though. Like it really like paces well. But yeah, where can people find you online, Joel? Even though they probably don't need to find you online, but where can they find you?
Mainly on YouTube. On YouTube is where I post the majority of my work, and I have an Instagram and Twitter and stuff, but I don't do much of my film work on there. YouTube, youtube.com, Joel Haver,
Awesome, and we're done.
And we're done. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me back. It's poetic. It's poetic that we've done it again. Did you cut the camera? All right.